Well, it has not been a great week for the royal family. That's an understatement of the century. Someone who knows a lot about this is Dai Davis. He's the operational commander of the SO4 Royalty Protection Command. Now, Dai, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Always nice to be with you.
Well, look, I mean, we're in some very sort of unprecedented, uncharted waters here with the royal family. Obviously, Andrew was arrested just last Thursday. He was then released, but we don't know, what's actually going to happen to him. A lot of other avenues are being searched at the moment. They're also calling into question people like royal protection officers who worked with him for years. What did they know? Who knew what and when? In your view, how seriously should we be taking this situation?
It's unprecedented in my long years on this earth. And as a historian now, it's unprecedented going back to the time of Charles I. But, this is really serious. It's serious because of who are involved, who knew. As I've said numerous times, but so-called experts are coming forward now to say, surprise, surprise, this involves 4 government departments. Well, I've been saying that for years. In fact, in more, there's the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, there's the Trade, there's the Metropolitan Police, there are other police forces, and there are palace and diplomats themselves. Where does it stop? The tentacles are so far reaching that it is constitutionally really for those who care about such a thing.
I know, and I just feel like the lack of accountability has just been astounding. I mean, you've always been very strong about making sure that the focus is on the victims. They seem to have been lost in all of this, and especially with his arrest on Thursday, because it had nothing to do with the alleged victims. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that they are just acting because there is some sort of box ticking exercise to be done here? With the recent release of the files, we can see that he might have given very sensitive information across to Epstein, as well as sort of collusions with China, Singapore, and other sort of hostile-ish states. Why do you think the victims have been lost in this entire conundrum?
It's a very good question, and it's one I've been raising since that infamous interview that he did with Emily. And I went on Newsnight, as you probably know, and called into question then, why weren't the Metropolitan Police investigating 2 British citizens for a crime that was alleged to have been committed in the United Kingdom and then further committed in the Virgin Islands and in New York by 2 British citizens? They say at the time they didn't feel they had the jurisdiction. Well, I disagreed then and I disagree now. And if it wasn't for the victims making the hoo-ha, and nobody believed Virginia Giuffre at the time, if you recall, she was called everything under the sun. Now we know, in my opinion, and I've always felt that she was telling the truth. But it's thanks to those victims, many hundreds of them in the United States, that largely now we are looking, and I've been alleging this for a long time, why don't anyone in government investigate his finances, who he was dealing with, the kind of people that he was taking on these trips with him? So these are important, and I'm delighted at long last, after years of Panorama and others trying to get this to the fore, but it goes back nearly 20 years or more, and successive governments have chosen to ignore it. And there are questions for prime ministers, there are questions for foreign secretaries, and certainly there are questions, sadly, as we're learning today's newspapers, for the royal family themselves. What did they know? When did they know? And did they have any kind of internal inquiry? And if they did, can we see that, please? And why has it now taken so long for all of this to come out? I'm afraid they can't avoid responsibility.
No, absolutely not. I mean, when you hear about, certain newspapers alleging that the king had a hand in paying off Virginia Giuffre, there was some sort of loan there that Prince Philip, the Queen, and the king had a hand in. When you hear about all that, you do think, how much did he know? And you were right to bang the drum after the Mateless interview, because I am astounded now with all that we know. that Virginia's testimony was basically just tossed to the side and almost just sort of swept under the carpet. Would you say that there has been a cover up?
Well, I've called it today and yesterday, a number of interviews, a conspiracy of silence. It's now the job for the police, and I'm fearful about, I hope, the current Metropolitan Police will take it seriously. If not, and if they don't, then perhaps we'll need to go to the Independent Office of Police Conduct, because it can't go on where they continually say when there's anything related to the royals, there's nothing to see here. An example of that is the clear emails showing that Andrew and Epstein colluded, allegedly, along with press officers and others, allegedly a police officer, no evidence that he did or she did anything, but there is evidence, and there's nothing to see here. I always say, if you don't follow the audit trail, if you don't investigate, the CPS, the Crown Prosecution, can't advise you. But it's for the police to investigate. And I've been crying out for this for such a long time, ever since the Burrell and the various allegations that
Hmm.
emanated from that trial. And every time something untoward is alleged against the royals, for some reason, nobody wants to investigate it. And until recently, and shame on them, the politicians haven't raised it. Now they're all going this, that, and the other. But where were they? And I said that about the royals. Where were you all these years ago? You knew about this back years ago. What did you do? Who did you advise? Who advised you? Who did you ask to investigate? It's
It's
coming out.
certainly too little too late.
Well, unfortunately, the most people in this country, including me, want a form of monarchy, but they've got to be honest. And if it's proven that they're not honest and they've tried to take us for fools, then sadly, they'll have to take the consequence like everyone else in this sorry saga. It just stinks.
You're right in the Paul Burrell situation where he seemed to have basically gotten off because he called in the Queen as his witness, if I'm not mistaken. Do you think something like that would happen with Andrew and he would eventually just be able to get off scot free as he has seemingly his entire life?
Well, it's for others to decide that. Constitutionally clear, the king apparently is above any reproach or giving evidence in his own court. And I understand that point of view. But let's cut back also. It's not just Andrew, it's his ex wife, possibly the children. What did they know? Where and how did they get these huge, huge amounts of money, so called birthday presents or wedding presents? Where have the authorities been? I mean, it's been voiced by the Mail on Sunday and numerous other newspapers for years, yet nobody seems to have either had the inclination or the courage to take it on. That's merely what I'm saying. If you and I avoided our tax, if you and I went all over the world and allegedly had millions paid into various accounts offshore, the taxman would be knocking on our door. Where have they been?
Completely does seem like that because, when very serious allegations against Andrew, many would just would receive sort of their door knocked down. It seems like he's just received a very light sort of knock on the door for what he's been doing. Now, just to bring it into the protection officers, the police are urging them to come forward with what they've seen or what they saw. What kind of information would they have realistically witnessed? I mean, you've been very close to all that action. Obviously, they are there with them in very close quarters for most of their lives. So, would they have seen things that could help with the investigation?
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? Every one of those palaces that Epstein had, the various homes, 5 or 6 different homes, police officers would have gone with him. They could not fail, apparently, because I haven't been there, to see the lewd pictures, the obscene, pornographic pictures, the various sexual implements, and they must have noticed how young some of the females and girls were. It
Mhm.
beggars belief that they didn't see anything untoward. It beggars belief they didn't report that. But furthermore, it beggars belief back when, after he was convicted, didn't anyone do a due diligence on him? Didn't anybody do due diligence on those that are traveling with him? It's alleged there are a number of business people who, and sons of the business people who traveled with him. Didn't anybody in the diplomatic service, didn't anybody in the police do due diligence normally? Before you go anywhere, you check everything and everybody out. That's the whole point of protection. You do the preparation. So apparently, seemingly, for many, many years, this ex-prince was allowed to travel, see some very dodgy dictators, people in Kazakhstan and various other people, allowed to do financial and try and do financial in Saudi, where he was rude, allegedly, to the diplomats. Didn't anybody report this? I mean, it's a scandal of the highest order. And lastly, where's our security services? Didn't they have a handle on who he was meeting with? Didn't that come back to prime ministers and foreign secretaries? And if so, what did they do about it? And yet he's been allowed to fester. He's been allowed to mix with really bad people, and the government, and they have to be back to the government, and the palace have allowed it, apparently, without doing anything.
You're completely right. And it seems like national security was at risk many different times during these instances where people allegedly turned a blind eye within the palace. Because, I mean, even one article that I was reading about his special code name that he would use, Mrs. Windsor, when he was taking people in and out of the various residences, is really concerning, especially hearing that Russian nationals, potential Romanian, these are all obviously alleged at the moment, but Romanian young girls were brought in. Who knows? They could have been assets of the Russian government, apparently, because of how they had to keep it under lock and key and, keep it very discreet. They didn't really do security checks on these women. I mean, how irresponsible can this man be to have done this? But I mean, are there even mechanisms in place for people to whistleblow in this situation?
Well, I hope so, and I hope that those on the fringes may be allowed some discretion and anonymity, I would hope, but
Mm.
they have to be questioned. And private secretaries have to be questioned. Senior palace officials have to be investigated. And if you know, as you know, probably know, the Hillsborough law is coming out. I don't think it's on the statute yet, where public officials, police officers, have to tell the truth. And if they're found not to, there are grave consequences. This is just the start. But it seems extraordinary to me now that we have 10 different police forces actually looking at the trafficking, which, going back to the victims, is clearly very important. So there are two key areas. There's the issue regarding the victims, and hopefully more information will come out as to the truth of those men in America who clearly were part of this ring, sexual ring, but also looking again at the people who traveled with him, who were party to the people like Rowlands and his son, who now named in the Mail on Sunday, and in fairness to the Mail on Sunday, they named them years and years ago. Years ago, and allegedly that information was passed on to the Prince of Wales as he was then. So I ask again, where is the audit trail? Follow the audit trail. And as with any corrupt individual, the audit trail should be followed along the money trail. And as an investigator now, many years, 50 plus years, at home and abroad, I'm just frustrated. I'm frustrated that we have all these experts all coming out now. Where have they been?
I want to move this on to the king when we talk about where have people been in this. Now, this will tarnish the king's legacy if he doesn't tread carefully in the next couple of months. I already think that, as you've said, they were way too slow to act on this. But, I mean, he is the king's brother. At what point does this stop being Andrew's scandal and start becoming a big problem for the crown itself? Do you think the king may have to step aside potentially?
Well, as I said, we are in uncharted waters, and really it depends what will come out. Day virtually now, new information is coming out, and the media and others are probing this in every shape and form. There must be some quaking in their boots, I think. Whether the king is remains to be seen. I feel sorry because he's not very well, doesn't look very well, and I don't think he needs this, but he needs it like a hole in the head, really. So, in one sense, as a human, I'm feeling sorry for him, but equally so, he and those around him can't hide from telling the truth. And for once, perhaps, if everybody just got a clean sheet and said, yeah, we did it, but we didn't want to wash because of various reasons, that we took the actions we have and explain it, perhaps then we can perhaps look at it more favorably. At the moment, as I've said, there appears to have been a complete conspiracy by so many of silence for so many years. It can't go on. And if it does go on and it's shown that he and any other member of the royal family was aiding and abetting this by their silence, sadly, they would have to take the consequences.
Is it credible that the king would be completely unaware of what had happened? I mean, since you've worked in kind of all these spheres and you know what type of briefings go on, surely he must have known some of Andrew's sort of grievances or what Andrew was doing behind the scenes.
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? Because, like his late mother, she was highly briefed on a daily basis by anything that affected the royal family. So, what's the point of their press officers, the reams of people that fundamentally we pay for, eventually, in one shape or another? What's the point of them if they don't brief the king and those at senior level? So, there are huge questions to ask for them going back 20 plus years, more, 25 years.
Completely. And just to finish off with, because my goodness, I mean, this is really, really interesting to hear almost firm evidence that there has been some sort of cover up here. Of course, this is all alleged at this point,
Well, it
but
is alleged, and I'm just saying it to you as somebody, hopefully, who has a degree of common sense, but a degree of
yeah,
knowledge as an investigator. That's all I'm saying. It shouldn't be for me to call these things out. It should have been called out by people far more senior than I and knowledgeable. But unfortunately, at my age, if I don't speak out now because there's been so much silence, I feel yet again the victims will be let out. So let's have some truth. Let's have some honesty. And frankly, don't take us for fools because we're not.
what's the single biggest unanswered question about the Andrew Epstein files that you think the public should know?
How was he allowed to get away with it for so long?
There's a maximum sentence for what Andrew was brought in for the other day of life imprisonment. Do you see that potentially happening? Do we see an Andrew behind bars in our lifetime?
Well, call me cynical. I doubt it.
Interesting. Well, Dai Davies, thank you so much for speaking to us. That was a very, very interesting interview. I really appreciate you taking the time, especially on your Sunday, to have a conversation with me. That was Dai Davies, operational commander of the SO-14 Royalty Protection Command. I've never been great on titles. It's my weakest point. Thank you so much, Dai. Appreciate you joining us.